what are some of the ways out of this? Like, what needs to happen so that we get closer to what we're all looking for?
Collective liberation from this finance capital colonial bullshit.
Cool. So, like, give me just step one on the anti-imperial journey.
It all begins.
There we go.
With pumpkin spice lattes.
There we go.
I'm not even fucking kidding.
Welcome to Friday Night Semites, where we may or may not support resistance depending on whether you like or subscribe to our page. Today we got a great guest, huh?
I'm very excited.
We're talking about war.
Oh, yeah?
We're talking about violence.
Great. Can't wait.
When do you think violence is justified?
Okay, nice.
Trick question. You even thought about it. You even thought about it, man. I can't believe you even thought about it.
I definitely fucking up already. You know, it's a cop-out to say depends. But, you know...
Sounds like that's what you're saying, though.
That's definitely where I'm going.
Wow.
It depends.
So you think people should actually physically harm one another?
I think
Who hurt you?
How much time we got? Should I lay down on the couch with
No, we talk. You go to therapy before these things. We've agreed on that part.
This is not the session.
This is not that. Yeah,
You're not billing enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think self-defense, yeah. But the question is, where's the line? Where does defense become aggression? Where does this become that?
Right.
I think it's a question for the ages. What do you think, man? I mean, it's a big question.
I mean, I asked you so that I didn't have to answer it.
My self-defense is
I volunteered to ask the question so that you would answer it, and it didn't have to come down. You know, they always want to ask the Palestinians, like, oh, do you support armed resistance? Do you believe violence is justified? Do you condemn this? Do you condemn that? I'm like, my personal opinion is we should either have no violence or all violence.
Okay.
I think we should all be killing and harming each other, or we should not be doing it. I don't think we get to pick and choose who gets to do it and who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, obviously, with the current situation, both Israel and other armies, other nations, and Palestinians, there's always the question of who started it. And does past violence justify current violence? And not that it's equal, not that it's the same. I'm not trying to say it's equal. I'm not saying going there. But there is the question of, like, everyone claims self-defense. Everyone claims this. And the question is, what is actually self-defense? And I will say this, because I was reading for the first time recently. I picked up a book. I'm trying something new.
Good for you, man.
Thanks, man. You know, and
glad you finally got the Bible.
Yeah, not that one. Actually, I'm going there, but not there quite yet.
Yeah.
But the phrase "eye for an eye," and so the phrase "eye for an eye" we all know, and it's usually justification for you did something, now I can do something back.
Right.
But actually, eye for an eye comes before, the origins come before the Bible. It comes from Hammurabi's code.
Right.
Ancient Babylonians.
Right.
Shout out to the old school Semites.
Right.
And the eye for an eye, the way it was written, was supposed to be regulating excessive return violence. So it's saying, like, if you took out my eye, Sammy, I'm not saying you should.
Right.
We'll save that for after the show. But if you took out my eye, I can't take your eye, your arm, your leg, and kill you. I can only
take my eye.
Take your eye. So it was saying that if someone does harm to you, you can't escalate.
It should be a proportionate response, as they would say.
As some would say.
And some would say, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We're all having a good time.
And some would say it leaves the world blind, but I don't know, because what the fuck are we seeing, really? So the thing about the eye for an eye thing was really interesting, because I always heard of it as revenge, but it's actually about not having too much return violence. So basically we need to get back to Hammurabi's, and then everything will be okay.
You're saying go old school, go back Hammurabi.
You said violence all the way or none at all. I'm saying...
So you're agreeing with me then? Or?
Oh no, I want to regulate. I was the context guy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a great guest today. U.S. Army veteran turned anti-imperialist turned podcaster.
Hey, yo.
let's welcome our friend Greg Stoker.
Come on in.
Come on in.
What a great, happy coincidence.
Yeah.
What a nice plush chair with lumbar support.
There you go, man. Yeah. We take care of our guests.
Yeah, so welcome, Greg. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Welcome to the Bay. I know you came up from Texas. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
First off, it's Friday night, so we want to offer you, we got some tea, and then we always have some food we want to offer our guests. So given that you came from Texas, we have here, this is chicken schnitzel. I don't know if you know about schnitzel. It's basically just fried chicken. So I want to appeal to your southern roots.
Have you heard of fried chicken before?
Yeah.
I have,
yeah.
And also, there's actually a large settler colony of Germans in Texas around Fredericksburg. So
there you go.
There's a large German population. That's kind of why we look the way we do.
So this is something the Germans and the Jews can agree on is chicken schnitzel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. We're already doing good work here. And then what else do we have under here? I don't know. We have this covering, but we've got some babka bread. Do you know about babka down in Texas?
I don't. We don't know. About the foreigner stuff.
So babka it's just sweet chocolate, or you can have cinnamon bread, and we got the chocolate kind for you. Of course, we got some pickles. Basically, this is a little like Kat's Lower East Side deli that we're having transplanted here to Oakland tonight. Make you feel at home. Anyway, I'm gonna have a little schnitzel to start off. Yeah, can I offer you anything? Anyway, welcome to the set, man.
Ah, thanks. All right.
Yeah, man. So you're a U.S. Army veteran. Mm-hmm. You've seen war, combat firsthand. So why would you be against it?
Well, old age, can't really get stuck in like you used to. Bad knees. I was in the 75th Ranger Regiment. I did 4 deployments, and over that course of the Afghan campaign, we can call it, I kind of realized that it was never a war meant to be won. It just seemed like it ended once the imperialist cycle was complete and all the money had been made. It was no longer profitable on the geopolitical scale.
Yeah.
So
now you consider yourself an anti-imperialist, and for the listener who doesn't know what imperialism is, how would you sum that up in a?
Or for like the person on the couch with you who doesn't know what
the guy who doesn't know imperialism, who didn't do research on the
it is a broad, expansive subject.
Yeah.
But I guess how the most easy way to kind of put it on the boilerplate and give the most basic definition would be it is when one country or nation state projects power onto something outside itself, like a territory or a colony, and it uses its power projection and its colonialism, so that could either be through economic colonialism, direct military control, the settler colonialism like we see in Israel right now, and it's meant to extract resources and send them back to the imperialist power.
Wow.
From which the power originated.
But how can a country do that now? We have the United Nations, we have international laws.
Oh, you mean those liberal institutions that we created specifically to perpetuate Western imperialism and give it legitimacy throughout the globe?
Oh, wow.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, those ones.
Yeah. It almost makes too much sense.
Hold on, I want to take a step back. So I just want to know, what made you want to join the Army in the first place? Before you became an anti-war veteran, what made you get in? Was it scholarship? Was it patriotism? Was it you look good in green camo? What was it I
just wanted to
travel and see the world.
I just wanted to be cool and get laid, man. It wasn't necessarily patriotism. I've never been Captain America.
Yeah.
I grew up in the metal and punk rock scene, so you'd be surprised how many countercultural people end up in the military because they get sick of being broke, and you're just oh, I actually don't want to be 18 and homeless, and I just wanted a job, and I wanted to go to college, but I wanted to be financially independent of my family for my own dysfunctional reasons, and I went into special operations because it wasn't, or I volunteered to go because it's not a unique story. Didn't have the best upbringing, so I wanted to escape that. And the Army is still a good avenue for that.
Yeah.
I would just advise you not to be in a combat unit if you're going to go just for the benefits. But it was a way out, and I also was really pissed off, and I wanted to prove something to myself. So I decided to go through a special operations selection process, and I passed, and then did 4 deployments, and then I got out, and then went to college, and then I started to kind of do the unlearning process of the military indoctrination. So I kind of turned against the Afghan war when I was like 22, 23.
You started fighting for the other team in combat, or?
No, I was just like, what's up with these drone strike policies? Like, literally, if you were on the wrong contact list, you could have been like some Taliban commander's baker, and then you're going to eat a Hellfire missile.
Yeah.
So it was just no standard of proof or anything. So
were the people around you questioning it as well, or were you kind of like surprised that everybody was like seeing the same things you were seeing? And...
Well, I started off as like an assault team leader on the strike force, and then I started branching more into like a military intelligence capacity. So I was exposed to, on a daily basis, different information than the guys. I was still on the strike force. I was just like the intel guy, but I was interfacing more with the information side of stuff. So that's kind of where I started to realize, like, when you're in your early 20s, you kind of take it for granted. Like, you still kind of buy into, like, we're the good guys spreading managed democracy.
One drone strike at a time.
Drone strike at a time. So kind of took it for granted because what we've seen, because it was the same narrative in the mid 2010s that it is now. It's like people hear the word terrorist and their critical thinking shuts down.
Right.
So through my exposure to like special operations intelligence and military intelligence, I kind of realized that what is the word terrorist? What does it mean?
It's short for terror artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's more of an art than a
it's
science.
More of an art than a science.
Yeah. It's also a really fungible definition. Right. It's flexible. It could suit whatever organization you want. And it's actually used as a cudgel to beat down anybody who has a problem with us as an empire extracting resources from their territories.
Right.
And then October 7th happened, and I'd been involved in activism before, and of course I'd been aware of the situation in Palestine for a long time. I wasn't active though on social media. I was not a public figure at all. But I think like October 13th, watching them drop, they weren't dropping the 2,000-pound bombs yet. They're dropping 1,000-pound bombs.
Yeah.
And then there were U.S. military pundit. I mean, I don't know why I put it in quotes. They were actually in the military. They were just bought and paid for, saying like, "Yeah, you can totally do it. We did it all the time in like Baghdad." And it's like, sorry, my best friend was a fire control officer in Baghdad.
Yeah,
he was doing like fire missions and stuff. And he's like, "No, you couldn't. You're just like straight up lying right now."
Right.
And I'm not being an apologist for U.S. foreign policy or military actions because that's a loser. Not going to double down and die on that hill. But there are certain double standard that like we don't do. I've seen guys prosecuted for war crimes. They went to jail and they're still in jail at Fort Leavenworth, which is our military prison. And it's wrong for us, but apparently Israel has this massive double standard for everything.
So you saw, pretty much blatant lies being told in the mainstream media
100%.
from a military perspective, and you were just like, this is wrong, and you started making videos to call it out?
Yeah. So I started like October 15th.
Wow. And were they getting circulated initially, or it took a little time?
It took like 2 weeks to go viral on one thing. It was basically just like calling out American vets for not saying anything.
And do you feel like you've become a lot more knowledgeable on the issue since this, just from following?
I think barring like Palestinians, I think everybody has. Because I always came at it from a military perspective, because for me, a lot of the Israeli propaganda was destroyed when I was in the military. Because
what do you mean?
Okay, so I was exposed to certain military literature, post-op reports about for example, the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. And
this was Lebanon?
In Lebanon, when Israel invaded southern Lebanon. The specifics and context aren't really important. What was important is it is the official position of the United States military that Israel, the IDF, experienced a strategic defeat against Hezbollah. To the point where they had to back channel to the UN, be like, "Hey, UN, please call a ceasefire for us so we can accept it and save face." And incidentally, that's like the only UN resolution they've like ever followed. Just to save their own ass politically, because they got destroyed by Hezbollah, spanked, kablooshed. You know, I don't know if that's a word.
So basically, that was when you started. Yeah, you know, that's the official term.
That's what it said in the. Wow, we just got some real intelligence right there.
So
kablooshed.
Yeah. So according to the Combined Arms Combat Center of Combat Studies at Fort Leavenworth, the IDF was kablooshed in 2006. And that's kind of how the propaganda started to unravel for me. It was through official military literature about the IDF, their combat capabilities, how they operated in the field. One of my favorite quotes from the entire corpus of literature about that war was, quote, the Israeli Defense Force, its officers and soldiers were unprepared to fight a real war, unquote. So, that's kind of how... It was a long, slow thread when it came to Israel, like unraveling like the entire body of propaganda that's gone in to like prop this up to Western eyes.
Do you see a different type of propaganda that like you got as a U.S. soldier? Is that different than what Israeli soldiers get? Is it the same? What would you say is the difference? What's the same?
Well, I mean, the salient difference. I mean, we both get the post 9/11 terrorist stuff.
Right.
The only difference is we're not told we're very special boys who are indigenous to the land.
Right.
Than that we're like, you know, we want to establish an ethno-supremacist state.
So you don't get the religious side.
No, I mean, there was some like chaplains saying some crazy stuff, you know, like crusade. But then again, like you didn't have to be exposed to that. Like, I never went to like chapel or talked to the chaplain or any of that. No thanks.
From an actual military standpoint, we often see Israel as an extension of the U.S., but militarily, in the way they actually operate. What would you say are some of like the main differences between the way the IDF operates and the way that the U.S. military operates?
Well, I had a schnitzel.
Let the man eat his schnitzel. Let the man.
One schnitzel, the truth comes right out, man.
Talk about. There you go. There. We gotta get that in that babka too.
I guess the most salient difference between the United States military and the Israeli military is on a very fundamental level. The U.S. military is not completely incompetent. So,
I see where you're going with this.
Of course, we struggled with fighting fourth generation asymmetrical wars like Vietnam and Afghanistan. But like when it comes to third generation state versus state actors, we do what state militaries are supposed to do: defeat other states and force diplomatic concessions. So defeating Imperial Japan or Imperial Germany or Saddam's army, whatever. However, when it comes to these occupational wars where you're fighting asymmetrically. So what that means is, as the state...
He's the math guy. He'll get it. So explain it to me.
Okay.
Eyes over there.
This has nothing to do with math. It's all completely conceptual.
Well, then...
But I will look at you so you don't feel...
Conceptual, for sure. Big words, bring it to me.
You have all the best and biggest words. So, asymmetrical warfare. On the basic level, it's like you're a state, right? You have an air force, you got an artillery corps, you got tanks, you got like hundreds of thousands of reservists that you can draw from. And then symmetrical warfare would be like you're fighting a state with all the same stuff.
Yeah. Right.
So Ukraine, while at one time it's a proxy war, because you could argue that the Ukraine is fighting to serve Western interests and it's tied into NATO and stuff.
Right.
But it is a military with all those things, and it's fighting another military with all those things.
So it's symmetrical.
Yeah. Symmetrical.
Yeah.
Asymmetrical is the Israeli Defense Force with all the state things fighting a group of 40,000 odd orphans, which they've created, by the way, with only small arms, AK-47s, IEDs, and...
Slingshots.
Slingshots, rocks, and RPGs.
Yeah.
So how it works, basically, is as the state actor, that's the occupying force, you have to win militarily because you're in occupation. So you have to defeat everybody. All the combatants, and you have to, at the same time, make sure nobody wants to fight you, which is an impossible task. I don't know if we're using TikTok language, but all the resistance fighters have to do is just not lose and drag it out and drag it out. So the occupational force looks worse and worse globally, politically, and eventually has to withdraw and is defeated.
Is this an old strategy, or is it like just something that's kind of developed
It's just
in the
like a
modern world?
rule of war. When you're doing asymmetrical fourth generation warfare and you're the occupier, there's no precedent of them actually winning. Didn't work in Vietnam.
Right.
Iraq was different. Didn't work in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was different than what's happening in Palestine because it was a proxy war. There were fighters being sent over from Pakistan, a lot of foreign fighters coming into Afghanistan from Iran and stuff. But what's happening in Israel is just straight up occupation. And unless they kill everybody, it's never going to stop. The resistance will never stop. And they're trying to do that, but it's not going to work because they don't have enough time and the international community is turned against them. So, bottom line, that's asymmetrical warfare. It always favors the insurgency. Politically. Because the insurgency cannot defeat the state military.
It's not a militarily victory.
But they can defeat them politically, which you could argue the resistance did on October 7th. Because their one major strategic goal was to show the world what Israel really is. This apartheid, brutal, ethno-supremacist state. And also put the idea and the conversation of Palestinian statehood back on the table. Because it didn't exist. It was in cold storage before October 7th. In a very real way. So that's the strategic political victory they went for. I argue that they succeeded. And now all they have to do is just not lose.
Do you think Israel predicted this outcome?
No. No, because they fell right into the trap. It was a ruthless trap. The resistance knew exactly what was going to happen to Gaza.
This is something I get asked a lot, and I know it's a ridiculous question, but I get asked it a lot. If you were the leader of Israel on October 7th, what would you have done?
Well, you have to. They have to respond, whether or not they have a justification or a right to defend themselves against the people that are occupied. We'll put that to the side. But a military response had to be made. So what you would actually do is use targeted strikes against known targets, and then you'd conduct special operations raids to capture enemy operatives, get intelligence off them, to start building out an idea of a network, and then you'd, over time, target that network while reducing, as much as you could, civilian casualties.
Is the IDF capable of that?
No.
But
they can't even conduct basic infantry maneuvers.
The question of like what they would do after October 7th. Like if you were the prime minister, I've gotten that, whenever you criticize, that's the question. You're like, what would you do? What would you do? If someone hits you, don't you hit them back? Bro
code.
For sure.
Hammurabi's bro code.
That's the original bro code.
Hammurabi.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, if Israel had just done limited strikes in response, and there would have been people dying, it would have been fucked up to the extent that it was, but you wouldn't have the world up in arms, because it would have gone back to the occupation level of normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, the status quo after a little bit of turmoil would have been reestablished, and the question of Palestinian statehood would be shelved again. There'd be some talk on the liberal media about like, we really need to fix this whole situation, and then eventually the news cycle would turn over a few times, then it'd be gone. That's what would happen.
Right.
And that's it, from the perspective that they want to perpetuate their continued efforts to completely eradicate the Palestinians. That would have been the best course of action. It would have taken many more generations, but that would have been the way to do it.
But at the same time, I think it's the same thing on the Hamas side, which is that they want to perpetuate the conflict. And I don't think that October 7th was no strategic victory for Hamas or for the Palestinian freedom movement, because look what's happened. You really think that's been a military or a strategic victory?
So when we talk about strategic victory, it's actually more political than it is military.
Okay.
It wasn't a military victory. I mean, you could argue that it was a military victory.
I would not call it a military victory. I'd call it a lot of people got killed.
I kind of would, insofar as it was the most successful raid conducted in like the 21st century in some ways. It was an escalation to an already low intensity conflict. War crimes did happen, were perpetrated by the resistance forces. But when you say it wasn't like a victory because Gaza has been leveled, well, that actually is the victory.
I don't understand that.
Okay,
and in fact, I disagree with that.
Okay, well, because you have to think about it's all political. It all exists in the world of international relations, liberal institutions like the UN, and you have to understand, like, when we use the word terrorist to characterize these people, we don't think they have any capacity for complex thought or complex goals. So, like, what is the goal of the resistance? It is to achieve Palestinian liberation. And now they're closer than they've ever been. Because right now, the UN General Assembly is signaling that they are going to vote, eventually, it's probably going to be further along than people think, on the issue of Palestinian statehood. It's going to pass. It's going to go to the Security Council. China's going to vote yes. Russia's going to vote yes. All the big players are going to vote yes to recognize Palestinian statehood. Now, the U.S. is going to be in a really difficult political situation because they are going to either have to vote no, which will further isolate us from the global community and bring us down into pariah statehood with Israel. We will lose whatever credibility we have because we will directly undermine the power of our own institution, which is the UN. So we have to choose between that and saying no to Israel. So if we say no to Israel and abstain, because the U.S. will never vote for Palestinian statehood, but they will abstain.
Yeah.
And in which case, Israel will be compelled by law and by these massive, ponderous institutions to begin the process of recognizing Palestinian statehood. If you read in Haaretz, which is like their left-wing newspaper, that is the only outlet, one of the only outlets that gives actual journalism. They put forward a bunch of articles about this where they were concerned about a civil war, because if Palestinian statehood is recognized, then they will have to eventually relocate all of these violent, insane settlers out of the West Bank.
Yeah.
And what will those settlers do?
Yeah.
They will fight the police, and they will not give up their guns, and there will be internecine violence in Israel proper. And the fact that not just Haaretz is saying this, but former prime ministers like Olmert are saying this too, and he has all his old government contacts, because he used to be a prime minister. He knows what's going on in the Knesset, and he knows what the major power brokers are saying. The fact that they're publishing all this means like they are legitimately frigging terrified of this eventuality happening. So when I say Hamas has achieved that victory, they have. Like that's a massive strategic geopolitical victory.
So I don't think the U.S., I hope the U.S. will abstain at the UN, or would, God forbid, even do the right thing and vote yes. Mm-hmm. But the question of whether Hamas made that happen and whether since October 7th that has made that happen, I don't think that's the case. And so I don't think anything I agree with you that, we want freedom, we want Palestinian freedom, we want safety, we want peace, we want justice. But the idea that October 7th was some master strike and that it has advanced the cause, whether you believe that that violence is legitimate morally or not, I don't think strategically.
Well, I think he's looking at it more from a macro view.
So I don't think it strategically brought closer to.
Well, when October 7th happened, I was like, oh, this is not the way. Like, this is horrible. This is a setback. And here we are months later. You have this record turnout in marches. You have actual governments willing to recognize the state of Palestine and this process in the UN, like, actually moving forward. I'm not going to be out there putting out sound bites like Hamas victory. Like,
no. You're not going
to get that from me. Yeah. But like, listen, I'm a mathematician. You look at cause and effect, and like, dude, I'm against violence. I don't believe in any. I don't even want soldiers to die. That's my personal. Yeah. I'm a pussy like that. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you look at the cause and effect, it's not just about October 7th, the people who died. It's about everybody who died after.
Of course.
And did Hamas know that in advance and know that was going to be the response and know that the international community I mean, I hate to say it, but I think they tricked all of us, man. I mean, you know what I mean?
But if they knew what was going to happen, if this is what they thought was going to happen, and this is why, like, when we talk about the resistance, I think we need to talk about there's different players and there's different factors, and there's no one Palestinian movement and there's no one resistance movement. There are different factions that disagree with each other, just
not
like there
on
are
the
Israelis.
big points, though.
Right.
They put out joint statements between Hamas, PIJ, some of the Marxist groups. They're all united on the macro objectives. Yes, they disagree about what government will come after, because the Marxists don't want Hamas to be in control. That's for damn sure. But for the moment, right now, they're all united. I think to say that they're not is a mixed characterization.
What I'm saying is that to say that Hamas, that this has brought freedom, peace, justice for Palestine, I think is a lie.
Well,
like,
no,
I think it's
that,
a myth. I wish that we were getting closer, but it's brought devastation. And the Palestinians, activists that I know, and the Israeli peace activists and justice activists I know, have felt that it's been never farther. And so if you look at what, like, Hamas has their own objectives too, which are not always just freedom and, you know, all that. There's a lot of other players in the region, and there's a lot of people who are getting used. And so I think it's too simple to say that I wish that we were closer to the UN recognizing Palestine and this being the chain that led to that. But I don't think that that's happening.
If it did, would your point of view change though? If Palestine did become a state in the next 6 months, would you at all look back at the whole series of events?
Oh,
and be like,
okay. Here's the disconnect.
Break it down.
Okay, it's that 6 months. No, this is like 20 years.
Yeah.
Like what's happening now will lead decades in the future. Yeah. So when you look
you're talking about very long-term.
Everything I'm talking about is long-term strategic goals.
Two kind of technical questions on that issue.
Yeah.
So it's been said that, like, on October 7th there was, you know, Hamas invaded and they attacked, and there was a very delayed response by the Israeli military. And so obviously either, you know, conspiracy theories float around like they knew, they allowed it to happen. Do you think it was just that they just were just not ready?
Well, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
no, there's no but. There's actually no but.
Yeah.
Having worked in a really high functioning place like JSOC, which is Joint Special Operations Command, you know, it's got the SEALs, the Green Berets, you know, the Army Rangers, you got like CIA paramilitary stuff in there. Sometimes a lot of dumbass mistakes happen, and you should never underestimate the basic incompetence of military officers.
Yeah.
It's just as likely that it was totally a mistake based off arrogance. You know, when you have the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, describing Palestinians as human animals, I don't think he's going to see any intelligence about, like, Hamas doing a massive, like, attack and take it seriously, because you know that's why you don't want to dehumanize people, because you start to underestimate them. So I think it's just as likely that they had credible intelligence, which they did. It came from both the CIA and Egypt, being like, "Hey, guys, look out!" And they're just like, "Nah." I think it's just as likely that it was arrogance, incompetence, and apathy.
So it's probably that. My other question was, how do you feel, or what do you think about the Hannibal Protocol from a military standpoint? Do you think it's an actual thing that countries should follow, or do you think it's insane?
I don't know what.
Okay, so the Hannibal Doctrine.
Hannibal Doctrine.
Remember, bring it back down to this side of the couch.
Okay, so the Hannibal Doctrine is not something that you want your government to do.
Dehumanize.
It's bad,
break it down like I don't know what
it's good. It's good for government, not good for citizens.
That's a great point. The Hannibal Doctrine is essentially, if one of your soldiers is at risk of being captured by an insurgent, do you conduct a hostage rescue operation that's risky, or do you just blow everybody up, soldier included?
So that there's no hostages, and you get rid of the terrorists.
Yeah, because the reason you take...
And so that's what it is.
Yes, because the reason you take hostages is for really one reason. It's to get other hostages in an exchange, or you want diplomatic concessions.
Some negotiation.
For negotiation.
Yeah.
So they don't want to do that. And they privilege not having to do that and negotiate with anybody at all ever over the lives of their own citizens. We saw that at the Nova Music Festival, where Apache pilots were just shooting entire lots of parked cars with civilians in it. Or you had tanks shooting into the kibbutz where they knew Israeli civilians were in, because no hostages. Because if you track this entire conflict, one of their biggest political challenges has been the fact that they have hostages, they don't want them back, but they can't be seen to not want them back.
Right.
So that's why they
and that's why you have Israeli civilians, like the families of the people whose they're hostages, their relatives are the hostages. They're protesting against Netanyahu. They're like, stop fucking bombing.
Netanyahu's just like, why don't you just shut up and let me do our jobs?
That was a good impression. Well, what I was going to ask is, so if the 20-year or 30-year or the long-term plan, if this is getting us closer towards freedom, towards justice, towards peace, what do some of those next steps look like? Because we're in this period right now where it's hard to see beyond the moment, it's hard to see beyond the day, it's hard to see behind the brutality and the carnage and what's on your screen, and like it's hard to see like what's going forward. So what do you see in terms of, okay, that's all the bad shit. What are some of the ways out of this? Like what needs to happen so that we get closer to what we're all looking for?
Collective liberation from this, finance, capital, colonial bullshit.
Cool. So give me just step one on the anti-imperial journey.
It all begins.
There we go.
With pumpkin spice lattes.
There we go.
I'm not even fucking kidding.
All we got is this Moroccan tea, but
Boycott. I'm not going to drink Starbucks anymore. A, because it's shitty, but B, because they're complicit. So that's personal. Divestment is institutional. So
I think I've heard about that one a little bit.
Oh, lately. Recently with the campus protests.
Yeah, just a little bit.
It's where institutions no longer invest in companies that are associated with the entity that's committing the crimes. And sanction is for states. We no longer trade with someone like Iran. That's a sanction. We no longer buy gas from Russia. That's a sanction. So that's BDS. And it begins with pumpkin spice lattes.
That's the B.
That's the B. People are, from our end, starting to recognize this entire system that it wasn't intentionally necessarily constructed, but it exists now. A system of distraction, exploitation, and rampant consumerism. And all of the things we consume are connected to atrocities, not just happening in Palestine, but also in the Congo, the Sudan, mineral-rich countries of the global south. So there's global awareness
Saudi
coming.
Arabia, all over.
And real quick before I say it, and through that we're also recognizing the imperial boomerang, which is where colonial forms of repression and oppression are through imperial feedback visited upon the citizens of that empire. So what that looks like in practice, our cops go over to West Bank. They train with Israeli Defense Force. They use spyware and espionage equipment developed in Israel, tested on Palestinians, used to enforce occupation and apartheid on them, and then boomerangs back on us. So that starts with pumpkin spice latte, and then we realize we're also colonized through imperial feedback. So it's all connected. And that's where the pressure to end what's happening in Israel and to end the pariah state comes from. It comes from the West, unfortunately, because that's where it originates from.
That's where the pressure to end it comes from, in the U.S. in particular, because we're the ones funding it, providing the diplomatic backing, all that shit.
So in terms of imperial interests, Israel isn't necessarily known to be a mineral-rich country or an oil-rich country per se. What are the specific imperial interests that the U.S. has in Israel?
Okay, so it's crazy because Israel sits at the confluence of a lot of different special interests. Sits at the confluence of the energy sector, You know, they want the Gaza Marine Basin. So that's why they're buying ports in Cyprus and building this $320 million aid port, which has taken like 2 months to construct.
And then they're going to be like, oh, while we're here.
My
drill fell into the ocean.
Did a little prospecting along the way.
What's that oil derrick doing there? Weird. So the energy sector, also hedge funds. Put it on trains, send it to Jordan to Israel, and then from Israel, which is our strategic foothold in the region, to send it off to Europe.
Is this specifically a train route, or it can be multiple?
It's a trade route.
It's a trade route.
Yeah, it involves trains.
It involves trains.
Also boats.
Right, because there's also camels. The discussion of the... you never forget, right? There's also the the canal.
The Ben Gurion Canal.
Yeah, and would you say that's also up there with?
I mean, if they can do it, they will. Well, first of all, it goes through North Gaza, so that's a thing. But also, it would take a long time.
Right.
So that's way in the future. What they're trying to do right now, from Mumbai to Europe, is compete with China and Russia and Iran, who are building their own Belt and Road Initiative. So it's trying to compete with the Eastern Bloc of countries, essentially. So there's that. There's the energy. There's the trade route. There's the defense industrial complex, which relies on field testing for its effectiveness. There's the espionage complex. There's the defense intelligence stuff. And there's just more oil. So we need it's just a strategic military
in the Middle East in general.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that Israel's never been on our strategic interests, but it does make the top 1% of our society very rich.
Well, then there's the other piece that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
There's the ideological part, and there's the religious part, and so there's Zionism.
Right.
And so I know, there's AIPAC, but the one that people don't know as much about is CUFI, the Christians United for Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I wanted to ask you, because we were talking about it a little bit earlier.
Oh, I grew up in Texas.
You're from Texas, baby. And so we're in the Bay. I'm from the East Coast. So I know, the Zionist arguments amongst my people, but Christian Zionists is a whole nother ballgame.
There's so much, so crazy.
And a lot of people don't even know about them, but there are more Christian Zionists in the U.S. than actual Jewish Zionists.
In the world.
And
there are more Christian Zionists than Jewish people.
There's not that many of us. Yeah. And so, I don't actually deal with them. They're not the ones that write me hate mail.
As a general rule, I try and avoid it.
So but in Texas, does that part of it come up in your world at all? At the rallies or at any of the things?
They don't have to come to the rallies because they control the power structures.
Of course.
And they control the police.
Yeah.
So they don't need to do counter-protests.
Right.
Because they just call in the goon squads.
Right.
So our governor, Greg Abbott, who's
He's a great
real
guy.
piece of work.
Yeah, he's weird. Yeah. He's a great guy.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
He's just misunderstood.
He's a big fan of the show. He's a big fan of the show.
He puts razor wire into the Guadalupe River so people drown. Separates people from separates families and puts them in cages. Real misunderstood. So
simple man.
Good Abbott.
He will support Israel no matter what because his power base believes religiously that Israel needs to exist. And I'm sure you've heard about the red heifer cattle sacrifice.
No, what was that?
Break it down.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Well, I mean, is that the Armageddon?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I didn't know the name for it. I know the story.
Who calls it that?
We did an episode on it. We called it the red heifer apocalypse.
Well, I know we're the sacrificial lamb. Well, that's why Jews are the sacrificial lamb.
Well, there's a cow, and then
Right. Yeah.
You either got to be Christian or you got to go to the
All right, so
I don't want anybody to be sacrificed, but I do sympathize with the Christian Zionists because let's just get this over with. You know what I mean?
Let's just do it.
Yeah,
and they said it's why are you stringing this out? There's going to be massive climate upheaval anyways, but they were supposed to sacrifice the cow in April, and April's passed. Mm-hmm. All right, and I was looking forward to the end of the world.
All right, so I want to make sure we're talking about the same things.
Okay.
So the thing I know, the Christian Zionists, the apocalyptic belief, and this is the fucked up shit about who are Jewish Zionist bedfellows are actually rabid anti-Semites.
Oh yeah.
Because the Christian Zionists, they support Israel because they believe that for Armageddon, apocalypse, one of those things.
The return of
coming.
Jesus.
Antichrist comes first, meaning that when the Antichrist is here, Jesus will need to beam down.
All right. Yeah.
And fight the Antichrist.
And then when he comes,
duke it out.
When he comes,
Day of Judgment. But then do the Christians? Do they live on, or do they all?
They go to heaven.
They get zapped up
and all
into
the
the
Jews
USS Heaven,
who were in Israel go to hell.
Okay, but how many virgins do we get?
See, that's why
That's a whole nother ballgame. Well. So that's the thing, of the idea that Marjorie Taylor Greene or Greg Abbott or John Hagee, that these are the friends, they're speaking at the pro-Israel rallies.
Yeah, but they're also white supremacists who are deeply anti-Semitic.
That's these are the fucked up bedfellows that Zionism has created.
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was the one who believes that the California wildfires are started by Jewish space lasers.
I just want to say for the record.
Is that true?
Well,
is that true? Y'all fuckers doing that?
I just want to say.
I fucking do it.
I just want to say, my cousin Moisha, he just had one of those pointers up in the redwoods. But it wasn't a big deal. It was just a little thing got out of hand.
Okay, and it just kind of spiraled.
So
from there.
Marjorie got that one right.
Yeah.
But other than that, fucking nut job. And QAnon, small things.
Yeah. So they are deeply anti-Semitic, but
Israel, you don't deal with those folks.
No. But Israel uses them. They're useful idiots for its project of creating an Eretz Israel, a great Israel.
The irony is, we were talking about the other side of things, where you have the Marxists and Hamas who don't rely on a lot of principles aligning for the same cause. The same thing's going on with the Zionists.
Strange bedfellows. Strange bedfellows all around.
In the end, it's what group can you get to join? Who.
Yeah, and the thing that sucks about all these Christian Zionists is they're fash AF. They're fascists.
Yeah.
And they're organized. And they toe the line.
Yeah.
Unlike us leftists who fragment all the time over ideological differences. They don't.
Speak for yourself. I'm a Republican registered.
I fragment myself every day, so I'm good.
Yeah. So they, over many generations, systematically and slowly and intentionally overturned Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. That was a multi-generational effort. So they are a powerful, organized, disciplined voting bloc. And the fact that they will always support Israel sucks because they're impossible to move. There are 100 million evangelicals. I mean, they're not all Zionists, but that's a big bloc.
And do they not know?
They elect public
Do they not know
officials.
there's Palestinian Christians?
They don't.
No, they don't give a fuck.
You've said you think this is going to be going on for a while. Mm-hmm. What do you actually see as the solution to this specific situation in Palestine? And I know it's a
let me just solve it in one sentence.
Can you please tell the Palestinian and the Jew the answer to the crisis?
Yeah, because we've been looking for a white savior.
Just manifest someone's destiny.
You got Jesus hair. Let's just do it. You know what I mean?
You do have nice hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's asking for solutions. I'm just nice hair.
I don't see how the two states workable, but we'll continue with the discourse publicly.
Yeah.
But come on, dude, it's one state or bust. It's not my place to tell Palestinians their freaking business of liberation, but I don't see how a two-state is workable from a geopolitical level, especially a demilitarized two-state solution, which is what's on the table.
Right.
Wherein a coalition of Arab states, Saudi, Bahrain, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, will provide security and protection for Palestine.
What do you think
that's that's what's being talked about in the Knesset right now.
Right.
That's not workable.
Right.
What do you think? Because you're talking, I like how you talk long term. You're thinking 20 years, 30 years, it's better than our day-to-day, hour-to-hour shit.
Yeah.
So I've thought, in the dream of dreams is one state, democratic, secular, equal rights for all, right?
Some people's dream.
Not everyone's dream. I'll say this side of the couch's dream. But the question is that, do you start with that? And so I've heard, and kind of where I'm at, I think, these days, and it changes depending on the day.
Oh yeah, of course, especially in the past 7 months.
Is like you need a 2-state to then get to a 1-state. Almost like, and the example I've heard is France and Germany after World War II starting, like the idea that France and Germany could then be in a European Union and have open borders in 1945 was ridiculous, was absurd. People would have laughed, people have said, that's crazy. But that you create, pathways like a federation or a, Middle East, I'm not saying there's going to be a Middle East Union like the European Union, but that there's a way that you have these two countries and then slowly, like, I just don't think you can have people living together now without killing each other. That's why I say it's the dream, but in the short term, I think I'm a 2-stater, and a long term, a 1-stater, and then really long, no states. Mm-hmm. That's the anti-imperial.
I'm kind of an anarchist. I don't want states. I believe the creation of the passport was like the single biggest failure of humanity.
The downfall.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think no matter what, like the 1-state solution, it would be kind of like segregation, the ending of Jim Crow South. Like, technically, it no longer existed. Was there still horrible racism and violence that still exists today? Yeah.
Not in Texas, though.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, Greg Abbott.
Greg Abbott solved it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't really focus on what that looks like because I sometimes feel uncomfortable talking about it because it's like, I don't know the internal politics as well as like a Palestinian would. I'm also not Palestinian. What I do focus on is the military and strategic niche of this.
Right.
So I look at, how long can a state like Israel in its current incarnation survive? And the answer is like not long. It's not going to dissolve in 6 months. It's not going to dissolve in 2 to 5 years, but it's never going to recover. No matter what happens, there will be no going back to the status quo, period.
Right.
Now, as an anti-imperialist, if America, worked hard and stopped all of our imperial endeavors, how are we going to make our money? What's your plan for that?
Barter economy. Let's bring it back.
Shells.
I don't think we'll ever see that in our lifetime. There's too much inertia behind it. Like, yeah, I do think America's in decline, but it's going to be in decline for a long time, like a really long time.
Yeah.
And once American imperialism is done, we've been focusing on it because it's attached to a genocide that's happening. But then again, China does its own version of imperialism. Fewer bombs are dropped, but they still control other territories beyond China.
Right.
And same with Russia.
Right.
Like Russia's doing its own dirty work in Sudan right now. You've got the Wagner Group, which is basically an apparatus of the state, working with the rapid response forces, the Janjaweed militias in South Sudan, just like murdering
paramilitary.
Yeah. So, I mean, imperialism exists outside of the West. It's just this particular brand of imperialism is especially visible and odious and violent, and it's been going on for 400, 500 years, and it needs to end. And it will, but it's going to take a long time. So I'm not sure if anybody knows what that looks like, though.
Right.
I haven't heard any good theories about it. So,
well, I would say we all become influencers and just
but the thing is, we may never.
Obviously, the answer is the podcast will solve the
a nation of podcasters.
Yeah, definitely. Just a bunch of bros wearing tank tops, just talking about how to date.
We were supposed to wear tank tops today. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's a podcast, so but we may never see it. Okay, because once that red heifer gets sacrificed, game's up.
There you go.
Seas come in, Antichrist happens.
Roll
the death metal soundtrack.
I mean, one thing that's really hard, to be honest, because you're talking, that's why I say I love the long-term, not that I want change to take a long time, but you take a long-term view of these events. Yeah. And so much, we're joking about podcasts, social media, all this shit, it's like today, what happened today, this moment, the news, and we have to take a longer view back, longer view forward, and that's hard. We gotta break out of the just this day-to-day, like the internalized, I don't know, colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, that's just like, I got to live moment to moment.
I think that's a great point when discussing what's happening right now, especially with the campus protests. So as a combat vet and an anti-war activist, I often look at the Vietnam backlash. You know, what happened during Vietnam. So there was an unprecedented level of civil unrest, violence against the war, and people thought like that pressure would end it. Motherfucker, that shit took 10 years of constant active 10 for a completely unjust war where our government killed over 2 million people in bombings. So these things do take time. And of course, like, people expect, like, what we're seeing is so horrible going on right now, we expect it to stop, but it's actually not going to stop. It's not going to stop for a while.
And so we can't stop. And so, like, that's, you know, that's got to be the message, especially to the students who...
No more pumpkin spice lattes, ever.
That's for one, always. I like your clear, consistent message. And, like, it can't just be a fad. It can't be a semester thing.
No.
It can't just be a thing.
And I don't think it will be because...
I don't think so either.
Because, like, Gen Z... fucked on housing, fucked on student
They don't give a fuck about
fucked on healthcare.
They don't give a fuck.
Nothing.
Yeah, so what are they gonna do? Like,
it's a generation of jihadis. I call them Gen Zihadi.
Gen G, Gen G, Gen J.
Gen J.
Perfect. I'll drink more of my pumpkin spice latte.
Hey, you can buy it from boutiques, okay? Just can't do it from Starbucks.
There it is.
That's right.
My last question is: we've talked about your journey from being, you know, a soldier to an anti-imperialist and helping other veterans move through get away from the propaganda. I know in Israel there are conscientious objectors. There's not enough. There's groups like Breaking the Silence that are, you know, against the occupation and fighting that. And then in the U.S., there's groups like Vets for Peace and About Face and other anti-war vets. How do we get more? Like, how do we get, like, the students, we can do what we do, you know, not me as a student, but, you know, civilians, but how do we get soldiers? Like, what's the, like the revolution happens when the soldiers put down their guns and, like, join the people. And, like, that's how, you know, when revolutions and the few times they happen, that's what happens. And so, like, what is, I'm not trying to get you to get but how do we get more soldiers to be like you?
I don't think you're going to get soldiers. You're going to get vets.
Okay.
And that's going to be an uphill battle. Because most vets are like, I did my fucking time, man. I did my time just trying to live my life.
Yeah.
Okay. And whatever they do. Or sometimes they double down.
Yeah.
Vets aren't a monolith. Like, sometimes they double down on, like, I'm going to put a Punisher sticker on my car and buy a bunch of guns and, like, call everyone a terrorist and, you know, bring back canceled words and call them those.
Right.
And some vets are like leftists. Some vets are just like libertarians, and there's some intersectionality between.
You got everything.
Yeah,
you got everything.
I don't really know because it's tough to undo that amount of like military indoctrination to like get into a protest line and start locking shields with cops. You know,
then we got to get the cops to put down.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck with that one. I'll take the uphill battle with vets over
veterans
cops.
First and then the cops? Okay, all right.
I don't think we'll ever get cops. When the revolution happens, cops are going to, like, you know, they're going to feel powerful. They're going to be endorsed by the state. They're going to have, like, nice benefits and nice guns. And you might be able to develop one or two moles, one or two plants, but that's it. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. When it happens, I'm gonna be like.
He's got the plan.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like 45, 47, prime field commander age.
Well, I want to say thanks for coming on Friday Night Semites.
Thanks for having me.
And we started with some food. We always like to, just have a little toast to close it out. We got our tea. We got some liquor if you want, but we can save that for after the show if you want. We got some Manischewitz if you want to try that. Goes good with the schnitzel. And anyway, I just want to say, as a person who's doing your job to prevent more death, we say to life, l'chaim. Cheers.
Cheers, yo. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, man.
See you Friday night. Friday Night Semites. We out.